The morning started with a sound that could wake the dead or at least make you wish you were. It was a chorus of bleating goats, their throaty wails weave VYing into the delicate strains of Vivaldi's Four Seasons like a nightmare duet. I bolted upright in bed, heart hammering. Con V-wine said for a split second I was ha-V-ying a stroke. Then I stumbled to the window, threw it open, and saw the truth. My quiet slice of paradise, 15 acres of rolling Tennessee farmland, complete with a weathered barn and a herd of goats I'd raised from kids, had been invaded. There they were, 30 wine glasses hovering above a table draped in crimson satin, fairy lights twinkling like some deranged Christmas display, tangled in the rafters of my barn. And standing in the middle of it all was Eleanor Voss, president of the newly annexed Willow Creek Homeowners Association, barking orders at a wiry man teetering on a ladder. "No, Gerald, the Edison bulbs need to feel earthy, not taconite you dare, make this look like a dive bar." Her voice cut through the morning mist like a chainsaw. I rubbed my eyes, half expecting the scene to vanish, but it didn't. That's when I knew today wasn't just going to be a fight, it was going to be a full-blown war. It all began a month ago when the county, in its infinite wisdom, redrew the zoning lines. My little haven, bought with every penny I'd saved from 20 years as a mechanic, was suddenly swallowed by Willow Creek, a sprawling suburban nightmare of manicured lawns and pastel mailboxes. I hadn't signed up for it, hadn't wanted it, and sure as hell didn't appreciate the glossy "Welcome to Willow Creek" packet that showed up on my doorstep. Inside was a 10-page lawn and property aesthetic code, a schedule of mandatory HOA meetings, and God help me, a coupon for a free spray tan at some place called Glow Haven. I tossed it in the trash and figured I could keep my head down, tend my goats, and wait for the madness to pass. That was before Eleanor Voss got wind of my barn. Eleanor wasn't just the HOA president, she was a force of nature, the kind of woman who'd wear stilettos to a pig roast and call the cops on a kid's lemonade stand for zoning violations. She'd been elected unopposed for the 4th time, mostly because no one else wanted the job. That should have been my first clue. She'd once find a guy do law 500 for painting his garage door too bold, a shade of beige, and rumor had it she'd shut down a 4th of July barbecue because the smoke threatened property values. Now, here she was, striding through my barn like she'd bought it at auction, her iPad glowing as she scrolled through a guest list, muttering about artisan charcuterie and bespoke coasters. I pulled on my boots, grabbed my coffee mug, and marched out there, steam practically rising off me. "Eleanor, what in the ever-low VYing hell is going on?" She turned, her smile sharp enough to slice through steel. "Oh, Daniel, didn't you get the memo? We're hosting a farm-to-table wine extravaganza for Willow Creek residents. Rustic elegance meets suburban sophistication, and your barn is the perfect stage. It's practically begging to be showcased." "I told you no," I said, voice low. Twice on the phone, once in writing. She didn't blink. Instead, she whipped out a laminated sheet from her Persia page from the Willow Creek HOA bylaws. Subsection 9 tapped it with a manicured nail. "Temporary communal use of suitable private structures for community enrichment, approved by the board." "It's all right here, Daniel. You're part of Willow Creek. Now your barn's fair game." I read it, then read it again. It was gibberish like someone had run a legal document through a bad translator, but Eleanor wielded it like a royal decree. Before I could argue, 3 volunteers in matching polo shirts were hauling my hay bales outside and replacing them with wine barrels topped with lace doilies. I'm not a man who courts trouble. I spent 8 years in the Army, fixing trucks under fire, and I've seen real chaos, but nothing prepared me for watching Eleanor try to herd my goats into a corner because their rustic bleating clashed with her VY Olin playlist. She shooed them into a makeshift pen by the barn side door, where they immediately started gnawing on a garland of dried lavender. One of them, Dolly, my sassiest girl, locked eyes with Eleanor and let out a belch that echoed off the rafters. Eleanor shrieked like she'd been stabbed, while her teenage son, Tyler, filmed the whole thing on his phone, narrating breathlessly to his followers. "Yo, we're turning this crusty old barn into a VY, bethink VY Neared meets frontier aesthetic." I stepped forward to intervene, But Eleanor waved me off. Let the VY signers work, Daniel. This is bigger than you. That's when I noticed they'd turned my workbench into a Prosecco fountain and hung a chandelier from my tractor's hitch. The final insult came when a guy named Vincent rolled up an aroma curator in a silk vest and loafers who sniffed the air and declared, "We'll need to neutralize the livestock musk. Perhaps a sage infusion." I stared at him. "It's a barn, Vincent. It smells like animals because it's full of them." He smirked. "Scent is the soul's first impression, my friend. We're crafting an experience here." I offered to let Dolly headbutt him in the next week. He declined. That night, after they'd crammed the last crate of overpriced Pinot into my barn's walk-in cooler, I stood in the doorway, staring at the wreckage of my sanctuary. My tools were shoved into a corner, my feed bins were gone, and my goats looked shell-shocked. Dolly was chewing on a velvet ribbon like it was her last meal. Eleanor breezed past me, juggling a wine box and a clipboard. "Don't fret, old man," she said without looking up. "We'll tidy up after unless your goats destroy something valuable. Then we'll need to talk compensation." I didn't respond. I just smiled a tight, dangerous smile and nodded. But inside, something snapped. Not anger, exactly, but something older, sharper. Eleanor had waltzed into my world, turned it into her personal stage, and expected me to bow. She didn't know who she was dealing with. I wasn't going to fight her with emails or bylaws. No, I was going to ruin her precious event in a way she'd never forget. And I knew just the guy to help me pull it off. My cousin, Nate, was a high school science teacher with a side hustle in amateur pyrotechnics. He'd once built a volcano for a science fair that accidentally set off the school's sprinklers. If anyone could turn Eleanor's wine night into a disaster, it was him. I called him that evening, pacing the porch as the goats settled in their pen. He picked up on the third ring, voice groggy. "Dan, what's up? How do you feel about turning a wine tasting into a chemistry experiment?" He chuckled before I even explained. "Say less. I'm in." By noon the next day, Nate rolled up in his beat-up Jeep, the back loaded with jugs of VY Nigar, food coloring, and a cardboard box labeled, "Do not open unless you hate your life." He grinned as he hopped out, cracking his knuckles. "Red or white chaos? I've got recipes for both." We set up in my garage, away from prying eyes. The goal wasn't just to ruin Eleanor's wine night, was to make it indistinguishable from the real stuff until the first sip. Nate had mocked up labels to match her inventory. Chateau de Pretension, Willow Whisper Blanc, pretentious names she'd bragged about sourcing from boutique VY Niards. For the reds, we mixed apple cider VY Nigar with cranberry juice and a dash of molasses for depth. The whites were a blend of watered-down buttermilk and lemon extract, chilled to mimic that crisp Chardonnay bite. For her beloved dessert wines, we threw in corn syrup and a hint of vanilla cloying enough to make your teeth ache. Nate even whipped up a rogue batch with dill pickle brine just to keep things interesting. "This," he said, holding up a bottle of fake rose, "is for every HOA that's ever fined me for parking my boat trailer 2 inches over the line. Pour one out for Uncle Ray," I added. He got a DULOT 200 ticket for flying a flag that wasn't community approved. We worked late into the night, sneaking into the barn under cover of darkness while Eleanor and her minions were off getting spray tans or whatever they did to prep. The real wine sat in the cooler, neatly stacked and labeled. We drained each bottle into a tarp-lined wheelbarrow. Nate insisted we save it in my cellar as EVY Denke and refilled them with our concoctions. Using a heat gun from his classroom, we resealed the corks and smoothed the labels until they looked pristine. No one would suspect a thing until it was too late. But wine wasn't enough. My goats deserved a starring role. Dolly, in particular, had a talent for chaos. Once unlatched a gate and led the herd in my vegetable garden, devouring every tomato in sight. Nate rigged the barn side door with a tripwire. One tug, and the goat pen's latch would spring open, unleashing them into the event. We positioned their pen near the dessert table. Goats can't resist sugar, and I strapped an old action camera to Dolly's harness. She didn't mind. She'd worn it once before when I'd tried, and failed, to train her for a local fair race. The plan was simple. Capture the carnage in high-definition glory. Nate stepped back, surveying our work-fake wine, booby trap doors, a camera-ready Godin whispered, "This is going to be a masterpiece." The morning of the event dawned bright and deceptively calm. Eleanor arrived at 8 a.m., flanked by her posse in coordinated blazers, fussing over table settings and the angle of the twinkle lights. Vincent swanned in, a new paisley scarf draped over his shoulder, polishing glasses and humming something operatic. I stayed out of sight, pretending to mend a fence post, tipping my cap whenever Eleanor glanced my way. She ignored me, which was perfect. The less she suspected, the sweeter the payoff. By midday, the guests trickled in. HOA busybodies, a couple of local politicians, a food critic with a notepad, and a gaggle of influencers in floppy hats. Someone even brought a drone, buzzing overhead like a vulture circling a carcass. Eleanor took center stage in a barn, holding a glass of our doctored Pinot, and launched into her speech. Today isn't just about wine nights, about unity, elegance, and the soul of Willow Creek. Cameras clicked. Hands clapped. I smirked. The tasting began. Nate and I lurked near the barn door, out of sight but close enough to hear the first murmurs. "This is bold," someone said, swirling a glass of VY Nigar red. "Very earthy," another agreed, nose wrinkled. A woman near the back spat her Chardonnay into a napkin and hissed, "Is this milk?" Eleanor brushed it off with a laugh. "It's an acquired taste, sophisticated palates only." Then the buttermilk bottles came out, and the room unraveled. A man choked, shattering his glass on the floor. A woman gagged, clutching her pearls. Vincent took a long, dramatic sip, paused, and muttered, "This has an unorthodox creaminess." I bit my lip to keep from laughing as Nate whispered, "Oscar-worthy." The real show started when a burly guy in a linen suit yanked the side door to escape the stench. The tripwire snapped, and the goat pen flew open. Dolly charged out like a general leading an army, camera bouncing on her chest, followed by a dozen bleeding comrades. They stormed the barn, toppling wine racks, trampling floral centerpieces, and sending guests scrambling. One goat Betsy leaped onto the cheese table, hooves sinking into a wheel of Gouda. Another dragged a garland of fake grapes across the floor, like a VY Tory banner. Eleanor shrieked, "Who let the goats out?" as Dolly headbutted the tower of glasses, sending shards flying. Guests screamed, slipping in puddles of buttermilk and VY Nigar. Vincent stood frozen, clutching a bottle, his scarf now soaked in pickle brine. Tyler, still filming, yelped, "This is live, Wild Total Barn Apocalypse." His phone slipped from his hands into a trough as a goat nudged him from behind. Eleanor tried to rally, flailing at the goats with her clipboard, but Betsy mistook her blazer for lunch and yanked. Eleanor spun, slipped on a slick of spilled wine, and crashed into a table, sending a tray of cupcakes airborne. They rained down on her like pastel artillery, frosting smearing across her face. The drone, still buzzing overhead, took a hit from a leaping goat and spiraled into the Prosecco fountain, sparking and fizzing as it sank. I stepped into the fray, slow clapping as I approached. The crowd parted, stunned. Eleanor, dripping and disheveled, pointed a trembling finger. You did this. I'll sue you for sabotage." I pulled out a folded page subsection 9, can read aloud. "Temporary use requires owner consent," which I never gave. "I've got the emails to prove it." "Want to see?" Her jaw dropped. The food critic scribbled furiously. Tyler's followers flooded his live stream with laughing emojis. "You trespassed," I said, voice steady. "You bullied my goats. So I gave you a tasting you'll never forget." The crowd murmured, some snickering, others filming. Eleanor tried to retort, but Dolly chose that moment to drop a loud, wet turd on her fallen clipboard. The scream that followed could have shattered the chandelier if it hadn't already fallen. As the guests fled, I turned to the stragglers. "Stick around if you want real cheese. No VY Nigar included." A few laughed, brushing goat hair off their clothes. That night, Nate and I watched Dolly's footage on my laptop, howling as the camera captured Eleanor's downfall in glorious detail, her flailing arms, the cupcake explosion, Vincent sobbing into his scarf. We uploaded a clip online titled When Wine Goes Boffle, and by morning it had 100,000 VYUs. Comments poured in, GOAT MVP. Release the director's cut. Eleanor got milked. The fallout was swift. At the emergency HOA meeting the next evening, the clubhouse was packed standing room only. Eleanor, bruised but defiant, tried to spin it as a misadventure caused by unstable elements. I handed over my EVY Denke, emails, bylaws, and the USB with Dolly's footage. The room erupted in laughter as the goat sigh VYEW played again, Eleanor's mascara-streaked face filling the screen. The secretary ruled her actions a violation of HOA code. She was ousted as president on the spot, her protest drowned out by raucous applause from neighbors who'd chafed under her reign for years. Tyler slunk out, already posting a damage control VY Deo. The VY Deo went VY Ral beyond Willow Creek. A news site picked it up, dubbing Dolly the goat of justice. Fan art flooded the internet, Dolly in a cape, trampling wine bottles. A local brewery sent me a case of ale labeled Dolly's Revenge. Then came the email. A production company wanted to pitch a show, Barn Brawls, about rural rebels taking on suburban tyrants. They wanted me and Dolly as the stars. I didn't say yes right away. The barn was mine again, the goat's content, and the HOA sent a fat check to resolve the mess, more than enough to fix the damage and buy a new fence. Neighbors started dropping by, bringing pies and asking to pet Dolly. One guy, a retired carpenter, carved a sign, Dolly's Domain, with a wine bites back. I hung it above the barn door. Eleanor moved to a gated community 50 miles away, reportedly starting a new HOA with no farm animals allowed. Good riddance. As for me, I sat on the porch one evening, sipping a decent Merlot, VY Nigar this time with Dolly dozing at my feet. The barn glowed in the sunset, peaceful at last. Then Nate called. They're begging for a pilot episode. You in? I glanced at Dolly, who cracked one eye open and bleated softly. Guess we got one more round in us, I said, raising my glass. The goats grazed quietly, the night stretched ahead, and somewhere out there, the internet waited for its next hero. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this VY Deo with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next VY Deo.